Isn't that cool? It's a nice little, looks like Jose Cruz knife that my friend Edmund brought me back from a trip that he went on in Portugal, and also made this wonderful little leather case for it. Always appreciate little gifts like that are very personal. Appreciate the personality of those little gifts like that. So let's get on with today's video, talking about my Canon FD camera collection, mainly the bodies. I do have a variety of lenses, but obviously can be used on any of the bodies. So we'll talk about the 5 bodies that are in my collection right now. I do want to downsize it by a couple of them later on this year, and I'll talk about that a little bit later, which ones I'm looking to maybe downsize. Let's get started. Canon made these beautiful cameras in the 70s, mid 70s, and 80s, all the way up through close to 90, I believe. Wonderful little metal cameras with a little bit of plastic, but a lot of metal on the bodies, very solid feel. A lot of electronics in them as well. So they were the first series of cameras from Canon with electronic shutters, fully electronic shutters, which meant they do have to have a battery to work. And you know me, I'm not a fan of having to rely on batteries. So needless to say, these don't get used a lot, but I do appreciate them because back in the late 70s, I just remember my uncle having a Canon A1, and that just kind of stuck in my mind. So when the time came for me to buy my first camera, obviously I just naturally went to the Canon cameras back then, and that was a Canon Rebel 2000, right around 2000, obviously. But sold all of those cameras, of course went into digital, and in the last 10 years or so, since film has become super popular again, I got back into film about 8 years ago and started picking up a number of the FD cameras because they're just built out of metal, they're solid, and I personally just believe they're probably a little more reliable in the long run than the newer cameras that are more plastic and more electronic. But who knows? I could be completely wrong on that. Anyway, just my opinion. Let's move on to the video today. The first one I have is the Canon AE1, which is one of the earlier ones that came out in 1976, ran through about the mid 80s. This particular one, there's a little bit of a problem with the film wind lever that it doesn't go back on its own. It winds fine, it just doesn't go back on its own, so you have to kind of push it back in place once you wind it. So in order to make it a little more usable, I added the Canon Winder AE2, I believe, or A2 to it as well. So it's just a power winder on the bottom, so when you hit the button, it just fires it off. Unfortunately, it makes it very easy to run through film, so you have to be a little careful when using this one. But this camera, it was my first one. Many of you actually bought this one about 15 plus years ago and just never got rid of it. So it's been on my shelf for a very long time. I've always been a great camera. It's very solid, and you heard the shutter sounds good on that one. So this camera, shutter speeds up to thousandths of a second. It has some automation along with the flash with it if you want. Other than that, with the other electronic shutter, there's really not a lot else on this camera to talk about. It's just an electronic shuttered manual camera with the winder. It makes it a little more automatic. It does have a self timer and things like that on it to give you a little bit of extra and metering and so forth, as all of these cameras do have built-in meters that all do work fairly well. The second one, I should say the second two, because they're both the same camera. I just have a silver one and a black one, are the AE1 program. So I have this one in both the silver and the black version as well. So let's go there. Let's go to this one next. Hopefully that wasn't too loud. Anyway, the A1 program in silver, my uncle gave this to me a few years back, same uncle that had the A1. So I wanted to give it to him with some lenses. So he just passed along to me because he didn't want it and knew I was into cameras, and it was in immaculate condition. It was hardly even used. I believe it was owned by an architect. They used it to take photos of things that he designed and worked on. Anyway, excellent condition, but this one does have the dreaded Canon squeal, squeak, whatever you want to call it, and the shutter doesn't really hurt using the camera. It just makes it sound kind of weird. That could be remedied by sending it off for a CLA for about $135 to Steve at the camera clinic. He can take care of that noise for you and get this camera sounding smooth again. That hasn't bothered me, and I don't use it that much, so I have yet to see that it's worth for me sending it off and paying for that at this time. The AE1 program offered just that, a program mode. So you could set the camera in program, and it would kind of handle the exposure for you. So that was a little more advanced, a little more consumer level feature on this camera to make it just easier to put a lens on and just go take photos. It also will work with the power winder as well if you really want to blow through that film fast. And back then, hey, it wasn't too bad. It was cheap, right? Now, it costs a lot of money to go through the film that quickly. So I prefer the slow, all-manual method myself. And then, of course, the black one. I picked this one up just off Facebook Marketplace. Someone was getting rid of it for a few dollars, so I went and grabbed it. And it's also in wonderful condition and looks great. So happy about that. It also exhibits the same sort of Canon squeal as well. So that one, put that one aside here. So those are the A1 programs, and those were 1981 onward to the late 80s that those were made. And then at the same time that these cameras made a little bit more of a professional level camera was the A1 that I mentioned earlier that my uncle had. Now, this is not his. This is a nice one that I found, again, probably on Facebook Marketplace 5 or so years ago. And it is a beautiful example of one, very little to no brassing, and just looks great. It even has the PC socket cover. Usually when they have those, that means they just didn't get used enough to lose it. So that's a good thing as well. This camera actually does sound pretty clean, very nice sounding shutter. That's kind of more so what the shutters of the A1 programs would sound like if they had the proper lubrication where they need to be to get rid of that squeak. It's a lubrication issue, basically. The A1 has a lot of other features, though. It has more options, aperture priority, shutter priority. It's got multiple timer settings, and so forth. So you can use this camera pretty much as an automatic camera, too, but it was aimed mainly at that prosumer market. You could also put a winder on it as well and go from there. Now, I should back up and say all of these cameras take the 4 LR44 6-volt battery. It's a miniature little single battery that goes in, and they all run on that. So it's very commonly found. You can find them very cheap today. I would recommend, however, if you're going to buy one, to invest in a lithium version so you could just put it in the camera and leave it and not have to worry about an alkaline battery leaking in there and causing damage. I make sure I always take mine out because I just don't use these that much because I do have alkaline batteries. But if you had one, it was your regular user, I would suggest go for the lithium, longer lasting one that is not likely to damage your camera. The final camera, FD camera that I have here, is the Canon new F1 here, or F1 new. I can never remember. You know what I'm talking about. But it's the latest version of the F1, the redesigned version. That's very all metal, beautiful matte black. This one I found on eBay a few years ago in a mint condition. Got a pretty reasonable price on it. Used it a few times, and I started getting the common sticky mirror issue with it, where the mirror would stick and then fall like seconds after the shutter were released. It didn't hurt the exposure, but you just had to wait for the mirror to come back down to shoot again. So I decided this one, it was just in such good shape, such a mint shape, that I sent it off to Steve at Camera Clinic and had it CLA'd, and now it works like a champ. Beautiful camera, great meter in this camera. I do have the regular prism on it because I'm not a fan of the AE prism because it's bigger, bulkier, and has the little window and all that on the top. And I don't use the camera in automatic mode anyway. I'm shooting all manual with it. This camera also takes the same 4 LR44 battery. However, you are able to use this camera, I believe, shutter speeds from 1/25 up without the battery at all. So it has the capability of being pretty usable without a battery even in it, and I like that in case it were to die. I can just keep shooting. All I'm going to really lose is the meter and the slower shutter speeds. So I would say hybrid electronic or hybrid mechanical shutter, however you want to look at it. But this camera, it's a beast. It has a lot of features, whole lot of features in it. It's just too many to go on in this video, and it's not really the point of this video. So to make a long video that's getting long a little shorter, that is my Canon FD collection. And like I said, there's two that I'll probably look at thinning out of this collection in the near future, because I don't really need 5 of them when I don't really shoot any of them all that much. And when I do, I'm always going to the F1, obviously. So I'll probably thin out the A1 and possibly the AE1 program in black. So if you happen to be watching this video and you're interested in one of those two cameras, jump on Instagram at DLHphoto with an F, DLHphoto, and find me there and just shoot me a message that you would be interested in that camera. And then we'll see what happens from there. But that's my thoughts on my Canon FD system. They're just a somewhat sentimental, near to my heart system, even though it's not a system I use on a regular basis. I just enjoy having these in my collection, along with a pretty good complement of FD lenses as well. Hope you enjoyed this video. Hope you're creating. I at least created this video, right? Even though we're not talking about photos this time. I do have one coming up where I did take some photos here in a week or two. I'll try to get that video out. It was a road trip that I went on to Columbus, Ohio with my friend Edmund and my friend Sean. And it was a crappy day, and we shot color film. So that'll be coming up. And then there'll be something else that was interesting as well that we came across while we were shooting. So stay tuned for that video. But right now, stay warm, stay safe, and keep shooting. If film's your thing, shoot film. If digital is your thing, shoot digital. But the most important thing is go shoot something. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.